The polished marble floors of Sterling Corp gleamed under the soft, recessed lighting, reflecting the ambition and power that permeated every corner of the skyscraper. Richard Sterling, CEO and undisputed titan of the tech world, strode through the vast lobby, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the expensive art on the walls, beyond the bustling employees who subtly parted to make way for him. His tailored charcoal suit hung impeccably, a sartorial armor that, for the past 2 years, had done little to shield the gaping wound in his heart. 2 years. 2 years since the light had gone out of his life, leaving behind only the cold, sharp edges of success. He was on his way to another board meeting, another strategic discussion about market share and quarterly profits, words that felt hollow and distant. His mind, usually a finely tuned machine, was a turbulent sea of memories this morning. It was his late wife, Eleanor's birthday, a day he had tried to bury under layers of work, yet it had clawed its way to the surface, bringing with it an ache so profound it was almost physical. He clutched his briefcase tighter, his knuckles white. As he neared the elevators, a small, almost imperceptible glint caught his eye on the pristine floor. Without consciously deciding, he stopped, a rare pause in his relentless forward momentum. It was a faint shimmer, easily mistaken for a stray reflection from the enormous chandeliers above, but something tugged at him, an instinct he couldn't ignore. Just as he was about to dismiss it as nothing, a small voice, surprisingly clear and calm for its owner's size, cut through the hushed grandeur of the lobby. "You dropped this, sir." Richard turned, his brow furrowed, expecting to see a clumsy executive or a nervous intern. Instead, he found himself looking down at a child, no older than 7, perhaps 8. She stood with an air of quiet determination, her small hand outstretched, offering a small oval object. Her simple, well-worn dress and neatly braided hair, pulled back with a plain elastic, contrasted sharply with the expensive attire of the corporate world around them. She was undoubtedly the janitor's daughter, a familiar yet often unseen presence in the early mornings or late evenings when her father, old Mr. Henderson, meticulously cleaned the building. His gaze drifted from her earnest face to the item in her palm. It was a locket. Not just any locket, but the locket. Time, which had been rushing forward with relentless indifference, suddenly froze. The ambient hum of the building faded. The distant chatter of employees vanished. All that remained was the small girl, her innocent eyes, and the silver oval nestled in her hand. It was his late wife's locket, the one he had given her on their 5th anniversary, the one engraved with their initials R and E intertwined in an elegant script, the one she had never ever taken off, the one that had been lost seemingly forever after her accident. A cold wave washed over Richard, followed by a searing heat. His breath hitched in his throat. He felt lightheaded, as if the very air had been sucked out of the enormous room. How? How could she have this? Where did it come from? 1,000 questions screamed in his mind, but none could escape his frozen lips. His eyes, usually sharp and penetrating, were wide with disbelief, fixed on the silver piece of jewelry. He recognized the intricate filigree, the tiny sapphire chip embedded in its clasp, a detail only he and Eleanor knew. The janitor's daughter, sensing the sudden profound shift in the powerful CEO, looked up at him, her young face etched with a touch of concern. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked, her voice a soft whisper in the sudden, heavy silence. "It fell from your pocket when you walked past the plant over there." She gestured vaguely towards a large potted ficus. Richard slowly reached out, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly as he took the locket from her. It felt cool and smooth against his fingertips, yet intensely hot with memories. He flipped it open, his thumb tracing the familiar faded photograph inside. Eleanor's radiant smile, her eyes sparkling with a joy that had once illuminated his entire world. A single tear, a betrayal of the carefully constructed facade he wore, escaped his eye and tracked a path down his chiseled cheek. He hadn't cried in public since her funeral. He hadn't allowed himself to. The world slowly began to spin again, but it was a different world, a world where a lost piece of his heart had just been returned by a small, unassuming hand. He looked at the girl, really looked at her, his mind reeling. Her eyes, a startling shade of blue, seemed to hold a depth beyond her years, a quiet wisdom. He felt an inexplicable pull, a sense of destiny in this unexpected encounter. "Thank you," he managed to choke out, his voice hoarse, barely audible. "Thank you so much." He knelt, not caring about his expensive suit or the curious glances he was starting to attract from the few employees who had ventured into the lobby. He knelt so he could be eye level with her, his gaze intense, searching. "What's your name?" "Lily," she replied, a faint blush coloring her cheeks at the CEO's sudden closeness. Lily Henderson, Richard Sterling, a man who commanded empires, a man whose presence usually intimidated all who crossed his path, found himself speechless, staring into the innocent eyes of a janitor's daughter, holding the most precious relic of his past. He knew, with an unsettling certainty, that his life had just irrevocably changed. Richard Sterling's mind, once entirely focused on the intricate machinery of global finance, now whirred with a new urgent purpose: Lily Henderson. As Mr. Henderson recounted the quiet struggles of raising his daughter, the second job he took cleaning offices downtown, the fear that gripped him whenever Lily had a fever, the crippling debt from the specialist. Appointments. Richard listened with an intensity he hadn't afforded a business partner in years. He learned that Lily suffered from a rare congenital heart condition that required a specialized surgery, one that her father's janitor salary, even with overtime, couldn't cover. The local hospital had done what they could, but the only truly successful procedures were done at a renowned pediatric cardiology institute in Boston. The cost was astronomical, a mountain of debt that had made Mr. Henderson feel utterly defeated. "That's why I was so desperate, sir," Henderson finished, his voice raw. "When I found the locket, for one horrible moment I thought it was my way out. Eleanor's face, it saved me from doing something shameful. It kept me honest, but it didn't pay the bills." Richard stood up, his gaze steady, the silver locket now a beacon instead of a relic. "You are a good man, Henderson. Eleanor's memory was protected by your honesty, and I owe you more than you know. That locket was the last piece of her, and you kept it safe until the moment I needed it most." He pulled out his phone and made 2 calls that would change everything. The first was to his personal attorney, demanding immediate action. The second was to the CEO of the Boston Institute, a man Richard had once funded for a separate research project. "Listen to me," Richard said into the phone, his tone instantly shifting back to the authoritative command of the CEO. "I have a patient for you, 7 years old, heart condition, named Lily Henderson. I want her file on my desk in an hour. I want a consultation scheduled for tomorrow morning, and every single expense, from the best private flight to her last prescription, is to be billed directly to Sterling Foundation. This is non-negotiable. She gets the best care immediately." Mr. Henderson watched, stunned into silence, as the man who owned the building he cleaned orchestrated a life-saving miracle in less than 5 minutes. Richard hung up and looked at the janitor, the compassion in his eyes, genuine. "Mr. Henderson, you will fly with Lily to Boston tomorrow. You'll stay in an apartment next to the hospital. Your job here will be waiting when you return, fully paid. Lily will get her surgery. It's done." Henderson collapsed into the nearest rolling chair, tears streaming down his worn face. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you. You're saving my girl. You don't owe us anything." "I owe you everything," Richard corrected, touching the locket in his pocket. "Eleanor's memory deserves this. Your honesty demands this. This is the only way I know to honor what she and you have shown me." Over the next few weeks, Richard plunged himself into Lily's recovery with the same single-minded focus he usually reserved for a hostile takeover. He flew to Boston, not as the CEO, but as a silent guardian, sitting with Mr. Henderson in the sterile hospital waiting room. He observed Lily after her successful surgery, a vibrant, brave little girl whose quiet intelligence mirrored the woman he had lost. One afternoon, sitting by Lily's bedside, she held out a crayon drawing. It was a picture of him, Mr. Henderson, and her, standing under a giant silver heart. "Mr. Richard," she whispered, her voice still weak, "my heart is better now. It's a good heart. Papa says you have a good heart too." Richard looked at the drawing, at the innocence of the silver heart connecting them all, and for the first time since Eleanor's death, the crushing weight of sorrow lifted. He had spent 2 years mourning the past, but now, thanks to the janitor's daughter and a lost locket, he had a future defined by purpose, gratitude, and the profound realization that Eleanor's legacy wasn't just a photograph and a piece of jewelry. It was the humanity she had unknowingly sparked in the heart of a powerful, lonely man. He realized that the locket hadn't just been returned to him. It had led him to a family that needed him, giving him a chance to live again. Lily's recovery was swift and miraculous. 6 weeks after the surgery, she and her father, Mr. Henderson, returned to the Sterling Court building, no longer a ghost family existing in the periphery, but an acknowledged and respected presence. They walked not through the utility tunnels, but occasionally through the main atrium. Lily walked with a new spring in her step, her blue eyes shining with life, a vibrant splash of color against the gray corporate backdrop. Mr. Henderson, though still nominally a janitor, was fundamentally changed. He no longer walked with a defeated stoop. Richard, true to his word, had quietly raised his salary to a livable middle-class wage and ensured his health benefits covered everything Lily might ever need. Henderson carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had faced the worst of life and seen an unlikely rescue orchestrated by grace. He was now officially the maintenance supervisor, a title that restored his pride and reflected the trust Richard had placed in him. The return of the Henderson family marked a subtle but profound shift in Richard Sterling's life. The sterile, isolated world he had built around himself after Eleanor's death began to crack open. He had always eaten lunch alone, a silent, powerful figure behind a mahogany desk. Now, nearly every day, he found himself drawn down to the ground floor cafeteria. He started by simply observing Lily, who was often there in the afternoons, reading or doing homework while her father finished his shift. One day, he approached her table. "Mind if I join you, Lily?" Lily beamed, gesturing to the chair. "Not at all, Mr. Richard. Papa says you're the busiest man in the city. Are you taking a break?" "I am," Richard said, sitting down with his untouched gourmet sandwich. "I'm taking a break from being the CEO and trying to learn how to be, well, a friend." That was how it began. Richard, the man who negotiated global mergers, found himself discussing the merits of dragons versus unicorns, helping Lily with complex division problems, and listening to her animated explanations of the book she loved. He discovered she had Eleanor's dry wit and a thirst for knowledge that reminded him of his wife's own vibrant curiosity. Lily never asked for anything, but her pure, uncritical acceptance of him, the man, not the CEO, was the medicine his soul desperately needed. The connection deepened on the weekends. Richard, realizing how little quality time Mr. Henderson got with his daughter, began inviting them to his secluded estate outside the city. At first, Mr. Henderson was hesitant, constantly apologizing for their presence, but Richard was firm. "Henderson, you kept the locket safe. You are the link that kept me tethered to my own sanity. I want Lily here. I want her to run on the grass and breathe the clean air. I want her to see that life is more than a utility corridor." The estate, a museum-like monument to his successful but lonely life, came alive with Lily's presence. She taught Richard how to find four-leaf clovers, how to skip stones across the pond, and how to laugh, a sound that had been absent from his home for 2 years. He bought her a pony, a gentle animal she instantly adored, and spent Saturdays watching her ride. He even started a trust fund in her name, ensuring the foundation for her education and future. Richard never tried to replace her father, nor did he assume a parental role. He was a mentor, a protector, and a friend. But most importantly, he was a bridge between Lily and the life her intellect deserved, and a bridge between Mr. Henderson's quiet, self-sacrificing love and the resources he needed to be a true father. The janitor's daughter had, unknowingly, become the architect of the CEO's slow, profound healing. She didn't mourn the great lady in the locket. She simply brought light back into the life of the grieving man who wore it. The locket, now on a chain around Richard's neck, was no longer a tombstone. It was a compass, pointing him toward hope, kindness, and a life unexpectedly reborn through the simplest of gestures. A child holding out a piece of lost silver and saying, "You dropped this, sir." The change in Richard Sterling was not just internal, it was palpable throughout Sterling Corp. The cold, efficient atmosphere of the company softened, radiating from the top down. He started the Eleanor Sterling Compassion Fund, earmarking a significant portion of his personal fortune, not for abstract grants, but for direct, impactful relief. covering medical debt for the company's lowest-paid workers, and funding college scholarships for their children. He was transforming the corporate ethos, making humanity a line item in his budget. One chilly evening, Richard walked past Mr. Henderson, who was cleaning his private office suite. A space Henderson, as maintenance supervisor, now oversaw. Richard stopped at the massive window overlooking the glittering cityscape. "Henderson, have you ever wondered why Eleanor's locket survived and ended up in your hands, not the police's?" Mr. Henderson paused his work, leaning on his broom. "I think about it every day, sir. I think God put it there to save my Lily by reminding me to be honest and then by leading her to you." "I think differently," Richard said, turning to face him. "Eleanor hated that locket. She thought it was too ostentatious, but I insisted she wear it. She wore it out of love, but always complained it snagged on her silk scarves. I think when the crash happened, she was fighting with it, trying to pull it off, and it flew out the window. She was trying to shed something heavy, something she didn't want to carry." Henderson frowned. "Sir, I don't follow." Richard smiled, a genuine bittersweet expression. "She wasn't trying to shed the locket, Henderson. She was trying to shed the grief. She knew instinctively that if I had her last possession, I would cling to it and never move on. By losing it, she was giving me permission to let her go. But when you picked it up, you didn't return it to me. You returned it to a man who needed to hold on to something just a little longer." Richard walked to his desk and opened a small, locked safe. He took out the locket, which had been resting on a velvet cushion. He didn't put it around his neck this time. When Lily returned it, she wasn't just returning a possession. She was giving me a job, a purpose. Eleanor's real legacy wasn't in this silver and gold. It's in Lily's laughter and your new peace. It's in the foundation we're building. He handed the locket to Mr. Henderson. "I want you to hold this now. Not for me, and not as a secret burden. Hold it as the ultimate symbol of a good heart, yours. And then I want you to give it to Lily on her 18th birthday, as a reminder that the greatest treasure is not what you possess, but the compassion you show." Henderson took the locket, his eyes swimming with emotion. It was no longer a weight of guilt, but a weight of grace. He was being entrusted not with a piece of jewelry, but with a sacred narrative. The locket was put back into the safe, now merely a symbol of the beginning of the story. Richard, however, walked out of his office that night lighter than he had been in years. The janitor's daughter had not only returned his late wife's locket, she had returned his life. He was ready, finally, to truly live the legacy Eleanor had intended, one of open-hearted courage and forward momentum. The story of the lonely CEO and the honest janitor's daughter became a quiet legend at Sterling Corp, a reminder that the smallest acts of kindness can crack open the hardest hearts, and that a lost love can, through a twist of fate, pave the way for a rediscovered purpose. The following year marked a period of deliberate transition for Richard, with Lily thriving and Mr. Henderson securely settled into his new role as maintenance supervisor. Richard turned his attention back to the immense hole Eleanor had left in his personal life. While the locket had brought him purpose, it hadn't brought him closure. He still lived in the expansive, silent mansion, surrounded by the museum pieces of their life together. He decided it was time to sell. The decision was not one of escape, but of acceptance. He realized he could not build a new life for himself, or continue his important paternal relationship with Lily, while anchored to the ghost of his past in that house. He tasked his team with finding a buyer who would appreciate the home's history, but privately, he began packing Eleanor's personal effects, a task he had avoided for 2 years. It was during this difficult process that he found Eleanor's old diary, tucked away in a false bottom of her antique writing desk. He had known she kept a diary, but he had never presumed to read it. Now, seeking final peace, he opened it. The entries weren't filled with profound philosophy or deep secrets, but with the funny, mundane details of their life, complaints about his terrible singing in the shower, excitement over a new art exhibit, and most frequently, expressions of deep concern about his workaholic tendencies. One entry, dated just 3 days before her accident, stopped him cold. "Richard is fading away. He works so hard to give me a perfect life, but he's not living his own. I wish he would realize the true wealth isn't in the profits he chases, but in the time he wastes sitting silently beside me, just being there. If anything ever happens to me, I worry he'll just turn into a machine entirely, without a heart. He needs a reason to stop, a quiet force to remind him to look down, to see the small, beautiful things he always steps over. Richard sank into the chair, the diary shaking slightly in his hands. Her words were a chilling prophecy. Eleanor had seen his impending breakdown and had actively wished for something, anything, to force him to look down. He suddenly understood the full, beautiful symmetry of fate. The locket hadn't been an accident. It was a cosmic answer to his wife's final, desperate plea. The simple act of Lily, the janitor's daughter, saying, "You dropped this, sir," was the physical manifestation of Eleanor's silent prayer. A child from a world he overlooked, forcing him to pause, look down, and regain his heart. He realized the immense love Eleanor had for him was so powerful, it had managed to save him even after she was gone. The locket was her final, perfect gift, the gift of a new life and a new, unexpected family. He closed the diary, tears falling softly onto the aged leather. The shadow of grief was finally receding, replaced by a profound sense of gratitude. He knew exactly what he needed to do next. He would sell the mansion and buy a smaller, warmer home, one with a garden big enough for Lily to ride her pony, and one that felt less like an ending and more like a fresh start. He packed the locket, the diary, and a framed photograph of Eleanor, ready to move forward. The next day, he walked into the office, his step lighter than ever, and asked Mr. Henderson to bring Lily up to his office. He had a very important announcement to make. Richard summoned Lily and her father, Mr. Henderson, to his expansive private office. Lily, now 8, entered with a confident curiosity, admiring the model airplanes on the shelf. Mr. Henderson, still prone to nervousness in this space despite his new title, stood respectfully by the door. Richard ushered them both to the comfortable leather seating area, pouring Lily a small glass of sparkling apple juice and offering Mr. Henderson a cup of coffee. He sat down and took a deep breath. "Lily, Mr. Henderson," Richard began, his voice warm, "I've decided to make some big changes in my life. I've sold my mansion." Mr. Henderson looked shocked. "Sir, why? It's a beautiful place." "It's empty, Henderson," Richard replied simply. "A house that large only works if it's full of life and laughter. Mine hasn't been, for a long time. So, I bought a new house, a much smaller, cozier place. It has a big sunny kitchen, and a garden large enough for a small pony. And a very smart, very curious little girl." Lily's eyes widened, her entire focus now on him. "But that's not all," Richard continued, placing his hands on his knees. "The time Lily spent at my estate showed me something important. You two are the best part of my week. And I need a family in my life. I need people who remind me of what really matters." He looked directly at Mr. Henderson. "Henderson, I owe you everything. You saved Eleanor's memory and, quite literally, my soul. I don't want to live alone anymore. And I want Lily to grow up having the best of everything, including her wonderful father close by, and the resources to pursue her incredible intellect." He paused, letting the magnitude of his next words sink in. "I want you and Lily to move into the new house with me, not as servants, not as employees, but as family. I've spoken to my lawyers. I want to become Lily's legal guardian, sharing all rights and responsibilities with you. This would mean I can ensure her education is second to none. Her health is always prioritized and her future is secure. And you, Henderson, would be my friend, my partner in raising her, and the respected head of the household." The silence that followed was thick, filled with the possibility of a completely new life. Mr. Henderson's face was a study in profound emotion, disbelief, overwhelming gratitude, and a fierce, paternal protectiveness. "Mr. Sterling, sir," Henderson finally managed, his voice thick with tears. I don't know what to say. I can't take so much from you." "You aren't taking anything," Richard insisted gently. You are giving me a reason to wake up every morning and be something more than a cold, efficient machine. You're giving Lily a future, and she is giving me back my humanity." Lily, sensing the emotional gravity, walked over and took Richard's hand. "We would be a family, Mr. Richard, like the ones in my storybooks." Richard squeezed her hand, his eyes shining. "Exactly. Like the ones in your storybooks, Lily. A very unexpected, but very real family." Mr. Henderson stepped forward, placing his hand on Richard's shoulder, a gesture that crossed the vast social chasm between them with the simple weight of shared emotion. "My girl will have the life she deserves. I trust you, Richard. You've earned that. Yes, we accept." In that moment, the CEO who had lost everything found he had gained the world. The Locket's journey, started by a simple, honest act, culminated in the forging of a new, unconventional family, built on respect, gratitude, and the enduring power of a love that, even in death, pointed the way toward life. The transition was immediate and profound. The new house, a sprawling craftsman-style home nestled in a leafy suburb, became a crucible for their blended family. Richard found that his immense organizational skills, which had managed a global corporation, were equally useful in managing a household with an 8-year-old, establishing study times, planning weekend excursions, and mastering the art of the pancake breakfast. Mr. Henderson, now fully integrating into the family unit, thrived. He was officially promoted to Director of Facilities for the entire Sterling corporate campus, a position that utilized his deep knowledge of the building and rewarded his decades of dedication. More importantly, he was a present, happy father, sharing bedtime stories with Lily and offering Richard quiet, grounded counsel, a contrast to the cutthroat advice he received from his corporate board. The years passed quickly, filled with school plays, science fair projects, and shared moments of simple joy. Lily blossomed under the dual guidance of her kind, ethical father and her brilliant, resourceful guardian. Richard taught her about finance and strategy. Mr. Henderson taught her about integrity and persistence. By the time Lily turned 18, she was a graduating valedictorian with a full scholarship to the prestigious university of her choice, having chosen a difficult course in global public health, a passion inspired by her own early struggles and Richard's foundation work. On the night of her high school graduation, as they sat in the warm, familiar living room of their home, Richard and Mr. Henderson had a surprise for her. Richard cleared his throat, his eyes filled with immense pride. "Lily, your father and I want to give you something. It's a gift that belongs to you more than anyone else." Mr. Henderson walked over to the mantelpiece and brought back a small, elegant wooden box. He placed it in Lily's hands. Lily opened it to find the silver locket. It was polished to a brilliant shine, the intertwined R&E engraving sparkling under the lamplight. "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, tracing the initials. "It's much more than that, honey," Mr. Henderson said, sitting beside her. "This is where our story began. Richard told you how I found it the day his wife Eleanor passed away. He saved my life and yours because of the honesty this locket inspired in me." Richard took the locket and opened it. The faded photograph of Eleanor still smiled out from one side, but now, in the opposite chamber, Richard had placed a tiny color photograph of Lily at age 8, beaming after her successful heart surgery. "Eleanor taught me that the greatest gift is letting go, and that love doesn't end, it simply changes form," Richard said, his voice soft but strong. "When this locket came back to me, it felt like she was saying, 'Your work isn't done, Richard. Find the good heart I've sent you, and protect it.' Lily, this locket is a legacy. It represents courage, honesty, and the impossible ways fate connects people." He fastened the chain around her neck. "It's no longer Eleanor's locket, or my possession. It is a reminder of the kindness of a janitor, the love of a lost wife, and the second chance a little girl gave a lonely CEO. It is the story of our family. Now, take it and carry that story with you as you go out into the world and continue to do good." Lily rose, embracing her father first, then holding on to Richard in a fierce hug. "I will, Papa. I will, Richard. I promise to always look down and see the small, beautiful things." As Richard watched her walk toward the door, ready to start the next chapter of her life, he knew he was finally whole. The CEO, who had frozen in the lobby years ago, was gone, replaced by a man whose heart was full. He had dropped a piece of silver, and in return, he had gained the true gold of a life renewed. The locket had found its true home, around the neck of the janitor's daughter, carrying the love of the CEO's late wife, and linking the destiny of two very different men forever.